Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessie Neal, and today we will be talking about the second of the most common characteristics seen among the body image avatar called the Self Objectifier. You can go back and check out my other videos on these topics. I've done all of the body image avatars so far, and last week I just put out the first on the Self Objectifier. So today the second one that I want to talk about that is so common among people who are self-objectifiers is called spectatoring. So spectatoring is something that the term was coined by Masters and Johnson in the 70s, I think. And basically it just means during sex, a person sort of watches themselves from the other person's perspective rather than being really in touch with their own perspective. It is a very, very common experience for self-objectifiers during sex, but also during the rest of the world. So even though this term was really coined to refer to a behavior or a sort of mental pattern that happens during sex, and the self-objectifier will often find that to be true there, it sort of bleeds out this habit of like seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes and really focusing your attention on what they think, what they feel, what they like, what they want, instead of sort of seeing yourself, well, not even seeing yourself, seeing the world through your own eyes. You know, this sort of first person perspective of I see the world is often not available to a self-objectifier because they're so used to seeing themselves, sort of watching themselves through a either real or hypothetical third-party perspective. This is super common for anybody who has been objectified, sexualized, or fetishized, which is why it happens to so many women, which is why so many women tend to be self-objectifiers, but it can happen to anybody. So with this in mind, the spectatoring habit is basically, for a lot of self-objectifiers, the habit of thinking about themselves never from like their own space, right? Their own mind, their own heart, always thinking of themselves as almost like a character in somebody else's movie, if that makes sense. So during the day, even when they're not trying to be sexy for someone or you know, like not engaged in anything sexual, they are constantly thinking about how they might look to other people and whether or not they are attractive or not attractive in the other person's eyes. And also going through that little checklist of like, okay, well, what do they think? What do they feel? What do they want? What do they like? So that they can then kind of be that to the best of their ability. And, you know, in different scenarios, this is going to matter a lot more or less, but so that they can always be appealing and attractive to the people in front of them. Why? Because the self-objectifier's sense of self-worth is entirely linked to how they look. So the attempt here is to be attractive, but it actually goes so much further than that. It becomes, how do I be this person's ideal version of me, whoever's in front of me? How do I become their ideal version? Because attractive is obviously super subjective. The self-objectifier is often drawn in a lot of different, you know, directions, and it makes their self-worth, or not their self-worth rather, but their confidence totally all over the place. You know, if somebody gives them a ton of external validation, they're like, yeah, I nailed it. You know, I was so successful at being attractive to that person. And then if someone doesn't find them attractive or they get negative feedback, boom, you know, all their confidence tanks, because the whole idea is, how did I succeed at being, from other people's perspective, attractive? You know, how did I look to other people? And obviously this goes hand in hand with the other habit I talked about last week of body checking, because when they're checking how they look, they're often thinking, how do I look to other people? So this is a big common habit for self-objectifiers. And interestingly, it can get really confused with things like empathy or sensitivity or emotional intelligence. Because when you spend decades thinking about how other people think, you know, thinking about how other people feel, trying to pay attention to what other people want from you, wondering and really like, you know, ruminating on what they expect from you, all these things that are like so tuned in to other people's experience, not only does that completely make it like almost impossible to tune into your own experience, it also makes you, you know, kind of good at that. Maybe not as good as some might think they are, because it's not particularly as accurate as they might think it is, but it definitely gets really well practiced. And so then they think of themselves a lot of times as just people who are, you know, good at reading people, when actually what they are is people who are spectatoring all the time. So in order to reclaim a sense of body neutrality or really just agency in their own body, which is a super important part of the healing process for a lot of self-objectifiers, they're going to have to break this spectatoring habit and start to learn how to see the world through their own eyes, disconnect from everyone else's eyes, and just be in their own perspective, think, their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own desires, their own opinions, all that stuff, letting that be contained with a boundary, as opposed to letting all of their attention sort of go out into everyone else's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So that's it. If you resonate with this, you may very well be a self-objectifier. I will be back next week to talk about more of the common characteristics for this particular body image avatar. If it was useful for you, I would love for you to hit like, leave a comment, ask me a question, go ahead and subscribe. And I'm so happy to have you here. I'll talk to you next week.